The lights in the studio were brighter than usual. Steve Harvey adjusted his signature suit and tie while staring into the mirror backstage. Something felt different about this episode. Not nervous, Steve Harvey had been in front of cameras for decades. But today, it felt significant. The producer, a usually unfazed woman named Jen, seemed oddly jittery. "Steve," she said, peeking through the dressing room door, "you ready?" "Always," he replied with a grin, grabbing his cue cards. "Who we got today?" Jen hesitated. "We didn't announce this one to the public. It's a surprise. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is here, and she requested to speak directly to you." Steve froze for a second, a rare thing. Karoline Leavitt? Trump's press secretary? What in the world does she want with me? Jen shrugged. She said it's personal. Emotional even. But it's not political. At least that's what she claims. Now that was rare. In this climate, everything was political. But Steve wasn't about to turn down a chance to connect with someone at the center of American power. He took a deep breath and walked toward the stage as the announcer boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steve Harvey." The crowd roared as Steve stepped out, his charisma filling the room. He waved, smiled, and slid into his seat on stage. After the usual warm-up and a few funny one-liners, Steve turned toward the entrance as the band shifted to a more formal note. "And now, our special guest. Please welcome the youngest and one of the most talked-about press secretaries in American history, Karoline Leavitt." Karoline walked out calm and composed, dressed in a soft blue suit that somehow softened her image from the usual press briefing firebrand. The crowd gave a respectful applause, some curious, some skeptical. They shook hands, Steve raising his eyebrows with a smirk. "Well now, I thought I'd seen it all. What brings the White House to my house?" Karoline laughed gently. "Steve, first off, I've been a fan for years. But today, I'm here because of something my father used to say about you." Steve leaned back. "Oh really? Do tell." Karoline looked down for a moment, then back up, eyes misty. "My dad passed away last year. He was a big man. Not famous, not rich, but strong. A Navy vet. Hardworking, tough as nails. But every Sunday night, no matter what, he watched reruns of Family Feud. He'd laugh, smile, it was one of the few things that softened him." Steve's face changed instantly. The smirk dropped. The room felt it. Karoline continued, "When he was in hospice, he couldn't talk much. But I remember one night, he squeezed my hand and said, 'That man, Steve Harvey, he reminds me there's still good in this world.'" The audience was silent. Steve's lips parted slightly, his eyes searching hers for what came next. Karoline took a shaky breath. "He told me, don't let this world harden you. Find people who bring light. Like him." That was the last full sentence he ever said to me. A tear slipped down her cheek. Steve looked away for a moment, blinking fast. "Wow," he said, voice hoarse. Karoline smiled, voice trembling. "So I'm here, not as a press secretary. Not as a politician. I'm here as a daughter who wanted to say thank you. You gave my father something no news briefing ever could. Laughter, comfort, and hope." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. And then Steve whispered, "Now you gonna make a grown man cry on TV." The audience chuckled gently, but it was already too late. Steve's eyes welled up. He reached out and gently held her hand across the table. "Girl, you just gave me a reason to keep doing what I'm doing." The studio lights dimmed slightly, the ambience shifting from talk show spectacle to something far more intimate. The camera zoomed in just enough to capture the shimmer in Steve Harvey's eyes. A rare moment of genuine vulnerability. He cleared his throat, shaking his head slowly. "You know," he began, "I've been on this earth for over 6 decades. I've met presidents, kings, athletes, comedians. But what you just said, that's the kind of thing that reminds me why God gave me this platform in the first place." The audience erupted in a quiet applause. Not the wild, performative kind, but the sincere appreciation for truth shared aloud. Karoline smiled, her voice gentle. "I didn't think I'd get emotional. I've stood in front of dozens of journalists, faced off with critics, and handled intense moments in the White House press room. But this is different." Steve leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Tell me more about your father," he said, voice soft. Karoline nodded, taking a deep breath. "His name was Matthew Leavitt. Grew up in rural New Hampshire. Poor but proud. He joined the Navy at 18, served 2 tours overseas. He was a quiet man, reserved. Didn't talk politics at the dinner table, but he loved his country." She paused, her eyes looking upward as if remembering him in real time. He had this old, torn recliner, she said with a chuckle. We used to joke that if he could take it to church, he would. And every time you'd say something on Family Feud that got him laughing, he'd slap that armrest so hard we thought it'd fall off. Steve chuckled too, wiping the corner of his eye. Man, I love that. That's what it's about. See, folks think this job is just suits and jokes and ratings. But when you realize you're a small piece of someone's piece, that's the real paycheck. Karoline nodded. After he passed, I started watching you. Not because I needed entertainment, but because I wanted to feel close to him. And it worked. The crowd let out an audible ah. Some audience members were dabbing their eyes. Steve sat in silence for a second, visibly moved. You know, people always ask me, Steve, why don't you retire? You got money. You got grandkids. You got everything. And I always tell him, God's not done using me yet. And this right here, it's proof. Karoline tilted her head slightly. That's actually another reason I came here. Steve raised his eyebrows. Oh yeah. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, folded letter. The envelope had seen somewhere, creases along the edges, the ink slightly faded. This, she said, is a letter my dad wrote to you. He never got a chance to send it. I found it in his drawer after he passed. The room fell completely silent. Steve took the envelope with reverence, staring at the name scribbled on the front in neat, all-caps writing. T.O.M.R. Steve Harvey. He opened it slowly, the paper whispering as it unfolded. His lips moved as he read, but no words came out at first. Then, softly, he read aloud. Dear Mr. Harvey, you don't know me, but I know you. You're the man who makes my daughter laugh when the news makes her cry. You're the man who makes me smile when pain runs down my spine like cold rain. I served this country proud and I've seen some dark days. But you've brought me light without ever knowing my name. So from a tired, old Navy vet, you're doing God's work, even if it looks like comedy on TV. Don't stop. The world needs you more than ever. Steve stopped, overcome. He folded the letter back slowly, his hands shaking just slightly. Then he stood up, walked around the table, and gave Karoline the kind of hug that doesn't need words. The crowd stood in unison, giving a standing ovation that rang through the studio like a cathedral choir. The applause eventually faded, but the energy in the room lingered, thick with emotion and authenticity. As Steve and Karoline sat back down, the usual wall between host and guest had completely vanished. This is one of those rare moments, Steve said, still visibly emotional, where everything else just fades away. No headlines. No sides. Just human connection. Karoline nodded. It's strange, isn't it? I work in a building where every word is analyzed, dissected, weaponized sometimes. But this feels more impactful than any press conference I've ever given. Steve chuckled softly. I never imagined having the White House press secretary on here and not arguing about policy. Well, Karoline smirked playfully, I can debate. But today isn't about that. Today is about gratitude. And healing. Steve's face turned serious again. You know, Karoline, I was raised by a coal miner and a Sunday school teacher. I didn't come from money. I came from pain. From hard times. But I always believed laughter was God's anesthesia. And now hearing your daddy found peace in that laughter? Phew. That's real purpose. Karoline leaned forward. I know we may stand on different sides of the political aisle sometimes, Steve. But I believe in honoring people who bring goodness into the world. That's what my father did. And that's what you do. Steve smiled. Let me tell you something, young lady. You're 30 years old, up in the White House, in the lion's den every day, talking punches from reporters and social media. And yet, you took time to bring me this? That's strength. That's grace. And that's love. The crowd clapped again, more subdued this time, an echo of deep appreciation. Karoline glanced around the studio. Do you mind if I share something else? She asked. Please, Steve gestured. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, and a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. It was an old voicemail recording. Hey, sweetheart. Just checking in. Hope you're working hard, not too hard. I saw that man on TV again, Steve Harvey. That fool had me Logan so hard I nearly fell off this old recliner. I swear, he got a mouth on him. Keep your chin up, baby. And if you ever meet that man, tell him your old man said thank you. The room was silent, but you could hear sniffles. Even the camera crew had tears in their eyes. Steve sat still, lips trembling. Girl, he said slowly, you done brought your daddy in here with you. Karoline nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. I promised him I would. Steve stood again and looked directly into the main camera. Let me say something to every man and woman watching this at home. If you got someone in your life who's ever said thank you, who's ever loved you quietly from the corner of the room, don't wait to tell their story. Do it now. 'Cause we only get so much time. And when it's gone, it's gone. The audience rose once again, another standing ovation, not for a celebrity, not for a politician, but for the powerful bridge between two Americans with different lives, bound together by one man's love and laughter. As they sat back down, Karoline took a deep breath. Steve, I don't know if you realize how many lives you touch. He looked her square in the eyes. Today, I found out. And I'll never forget it. After the commercial break, the lights came back up with a softer glow. The studio, once buzzing with energy, had taken on the stillness of a sacred space. Steve turned to the camera and then to Karoline. You know what I'd like to do? Steve asked, voice low and sincere. I want to forget we're on a show for a second. I want to talk to you, Karoline, not the press secretary, not the politician, just the daughter of a good man. Karoline smiled, touched. Then let's talk. Steve leaned back. Do you ever feel like the world's gotten too loud for people to just feel anymore? Without hesitation, she replied, every day. In politics, emotions are viewed as weaknesses. Vulnerability? Unacceptable. But the truth is we're all walking around carrying something invisible. Steve nodded. That's why this right here, this kind of moment, is rare. And it's why it matters. Karoline's voice softened. My dad wasn't rich. He didn't leave behind stocks or properties. He left behind memories, handwritten letters, and pride. And even though he never walked the halls of power like I do, he's still the most powerful man I've ever known. The crowd applauded gently. Steve leaned forward, eyes glinting with a mix of sadness and warmth. I lost my mama when I was just getting on my feet. She never saw me host the Miss Universe pageant, never saw me buy my first suit that didn't come from Goodwill. But every time I do something good, I say, you see that, Mama? Karoline nodded. I say the same to my dad before every press briefing. Steve turned to the audience and said, folks, we live in a world of titles, president, press secretary, host. But what really defines us are the moments that never make the headlines. There was a pause pregnant with reflection. Then Karoline said, that's why I came here. Not just to share a story, but to remind people that behind every public figure is a human. And behind every human is someone who made them who they are. Steve smiled. Girl, if your daddy could see you now. She laughed gently. Oh, I hear his voice all the time. Sometimes I swear I still smell his aftershave in my apartment. And you know what he'd say about today? You gave that man his flowers, baby girl. The crowd reacted with soft laughter, some teary-eyed. Steve placed his hand over his heart. And I received them, baby. I did. I promise you that. Just then, the producer gestured off camera. There was a special surprise. The studio monitors lit up with a black and white photo. It was Matthew Leavitt in his Navy uniform, young, strong, proud. A second photo showed him in that infamous old recliner, eyes squinting with laughter, clearly watching Family Feud. The camera returned to Steve, who was openly crying now, not a showbiz tear, but a stream of real emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice shaking, today I received the highest honor I ever could. Love from a man I never met passed through the heart of his daughter. Karoline reached over and took his hand. He believed in goodness, Mr. Harvey. He saw it in you. And now so does the world. A single tear slid down Steve's cheek. Thank you. For reminding me why I started this journey. And for bringing your father with you today. The applause returned, thunderous, rising like a wave that washed over the entire room. But Steve wasn't done. He stood, walked to center stage, and looked directly into the camera again. To every viewer out there, make the call. Write the letter. Show up for the people who gave you life. I promise you, it's worth more than any paycheck or promotion. And with that, the screen faded into a soft image of Matthew's smiling face beside the words. To Mr. Harvey from a Navy vet, thank you for the laughter. The episode was winding down, but neither Steve nor Karoline looked ready to let go of the moment. The audience was still, not wanting to break the sacred silence that had fallen upon the studio. For once, no one reached for their phones. They weren't watching a show anymore. They were experiencing something real. Steve gently cleared his throat, his voice gravelly but strong. I've interviewed a lot of people. Presidents, preachers, comedians, folks with billion-dollar businesses. But this touched something in me deeper than all of them. Karoline smiled through glassy eyes. You gave my father peace, Mr. Harvey. And today you gave me healing. Steve gestured toward her. You're stronger than most people I've met. I don't care what side of the aisle folks are on, you walk into rooms where people are looking to knock you down. And you stand tall with your daddy's love in your heart. That ain't politics. That's character. A long, respectful applause broke out. One of those rare moments in live television where everyone claps not because the applause sign told them to, but because they had to. Steve walked toward Karoline and held both her hands in his. You reminded me today that laughter matters. That people matter. That legacy ain't just about money, it's about meaning. And if your daddy's watching us from wherever good souls go, I know he's proud. Karoline wiped her eyes. And if your mother's watching, she's saying that boy turned out all right. Steve chuckled, voice cracking. Ah, girl, you gon' mess around and have me ugly crying on national television. The crowd laughed gently. Then Steve turned to the camera one final time. His voice steady now, strong like a preacher delivering his Sunday benediction. Listen to me, America. We argue, we yell, we fight over red and blue, but in the end, we all love, we all hurt, and we all remember the people who held us up when we were falling apart. Karoline Leavitt didn't come here to spin politics, she came here to honor a man. A father. A vet. A human being. And in doing so, she gave me a gift. He pointed to the audience and to the viewers at home. Go give somebody their flowers while they can still smell them. Trust me. You won't regret it. The band started to play a soft outro, something soulful, maybe Bill Withers, maybe Al Green. Something that wraps around your soul like a Sunday hug. Karoline stood, straightened her blazer, and gave Steve one last embrace. I'll never forget this, she whispered. Me neither, he whispered back. As the show faded out, the camera lingered one last time on the photo of Matthew Leavitt smiling in that recliner. Right below it, handwritten in Karoline's own cursive script, were the words, "Laughter is the last great freedom. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. ML."